80 years ago today, bells rang out across Canada and across liberated Europe to celebrate Nazi Germany's unconditional surrender to Allied forces. Veteran Canadian journalist Peter Mansbridge has covered this anniversary for decades. He's done live broadcasts for CBC television from the Netherlands, which Canadian soldiers liberated, and he's reported from France, where Allied soldiers landed on D-Day. So we thought we'd reach out to him and hear what he's reflecting on today. Peter Mansbridge joins us now from Scotland. Have people shared stories with you that stick with you about, the home front over those years or about that kind of moment in our collective history?
It was difficult on the home front because, these fellows who went overseas and they were, fighting in the air, on the land, on the sea, they were almost all volunteers. They had given up jobs in small towns and big cities because they believed in what they were doing, that this was a fight worth fighting. I'll tell you a quick story about a Canadian from the Netherlands experience. It happened in a town called Wageningen in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And I was in a room on the main floor of a hotel. It was a conference room. It was an old hotel. It was a conference room where inside the table was the same one that had been there 50 years before, and the chairs were the same chairs that had been there 50 years before. And sitting at the table was a fellow who'd been there 50 years before. He was a Canadian named George Kitching. He was a general. And in 1945, he was sitting at that table with two of his colleagues to accept the surrender of German generals in May of 1945. And I said to him, General, what are you thinking? What are you seeing at this moment when you look around this room? And he said to me, I can still see the ghosts of those Nazi generals when they walked in this room to surrender to Canada because we defeated them on the battlefield. And, it makes your kind of hair stand up on the back of your neck to hear that story. But that's what he remembered. He remembered it perfectly from the moment of a half a century before.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Now, as you mentioned, there are less and less veterans left from the Second World War, and with each year, we'll get to a point where there are, none surviving and among us to share those stories. So we take up the responsibility to do that. What are the stories you personally want to keep telling in their memory?
I can remember once talking to a mayor of a small town in the Netherlands and asking him, why do you have these celebrations every year to remember Canada and thank Canada? And he said, you don't get it. You have to have been occupied to get it. And we were occupied by the Nazis. We damn near died because of the Nazis. And who came to save us? Canada came to save us. They liberated us. And then when we were starving to death, Canadian Air Force pilots dropped food bundles to us in those final months of the war. You hear stories like that, and you go, we have to tell those stories. We have to ensure that Canadians understand. And there are stories just like it from Belgium and France and Italy and elsewhere as a result of the Second World War and the things Canadians did. And I remembered perhaps at times more on those locations than they are remembered at home. There's lots to remember and be proud of and to understand in terms of our history.